Greetings. An anomaly has occurred with the lunar-bound Capstone spacecraft. The first indication of trouble was provided on Twitter by amateur astronomer and satellite observer Scott Tilley. He first reported indications that NASA's Deep Space Network tracking antennas were not receiving signals from the small spacecraft early Saturday afternoon. He noted that continuous uplinks without downlinks were occurring, and occasional short periods of contact indicated to him that perhaps the spacecraft was rotating slowly. On Saturday evening, NASA and Advanced Space issued a release revealing the anomaly. Quote, "The Capstone spacecraft was executing a planned trajectory correction maneuver Thursday evening, September 8. We have since obtained telemetry that confirms the vehicle suffered an anomaly near the end of the planned maneuver and is currently in safe mode. The Capstone mission team has good knowledge of the state and status of the spacecraft. The anomaly resolution has been enabled by the exceptional support of the team at NASA's Deep Space Network. The mission operations team is in contact with the vehicle and working to resolve the anomaly. As resolution efforts progress, more updates will be provided. The spacecraft remains on its planned course to the Moon." Unquote. Note that the final sentence does not confirm if the full trajectory maneuver was successfully completed. The mission was scheduled to arrive in lunar orbit on November 13. Capstone is short for Cislunar Autonomous Positioning System Technology Operations and Navigation Experiment. It is owned by Advanced Space on behalf of NASA. The spacecraft was designed and built by Terran Orbital. Operations are performed jointly by teams at Advanced Space and Terran Orbital. An improperly formatted command caused the craft to lose contact during its commissioning shortly after launch by a Rocket Lab Electron rocket on June 28. A successful TCM was performed in late July. Capstone is taking a long, but fuel-efficient route to the Moon, flying about 958,000 miles from Earth before looping back around to its near rectilinear halo orbit, NRHO. We're now just over 2 weeks away from the epic impact of the double asteroid redirection test. Didymos and its orbiting moonlet were seen in this image, a composite of 243 pictures taken by the Draco camera on July 27. Draco stands for Didymos Reconnaissance and Asteroid Camera for optical navigation. Impact will come Monday, September 26 at 7:14 p.m. Eastern. From this distance, about 20 million miles away from DART, the Didymos system is still very faint, and navigation camera experts were uncertain whether Draco would be able to spot the asteroid yet. But once the 243 images Draco took during this observation sequence were combined, the team was able to enhance it to reveal Didymos and pinpoint its location. This first set of images is being used as a test to prove our imaging techniques, said Elena Adams, the DART mission systems engineer at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, APL, in Laurel, Maryland. The quality of the image is similar to what we could obtain from ground-based telescopes, but it is important to show that Draco is working properly and can see its target to make any adjustments needed before we begin using the images to guide the spacecraft into the asteroid autonomously. Although the team has already conducted a number of navigation simulations using non-Draco images of Didymos, DART will ultimately depend on its ability to see and process images of Didymos and Dimorphos, once it, too, can be seen, to guide the spacecraft toward the asteroid, especially in the final 4 hours before impact. At that point, DART will need to self-navigate to impact successfully with Dimorphos without any human intervention. Seeing the Draco images of Didymos for the first time, we can iron out the best settings for Draco and fine-tune the software, said Julie Belrose, the DART navigation lead at JPL. In September, we'll refine where DART is aiming by getting a more precise determination of Didymos' location. Using observations taken every 5 hours, the DART team will execute 3 trajectory correction maneuvers over the next 3 weeks, each of which will further reduce the margin of error for the spacecraft's required trajectory to impact. After the final maneuver on September 25, approximately 24 hours before impact, the navigation team will know the position of the target Dimorphos within 2 kilometers. From there, DART will be on its own to autonomously guide itself to its collision with the asteroid moonlet. Draco has subsequently observed Didymos during planned observations on August 12th, 13th, and 22nd. SpaceX has filed an appeal with the Federal Communications Commission challenging its recent move to cancel almost $900 million in rural broadband subsidies that would have applied to Starlink subscriptions. The reversal of an earlier tentative approval, which also impacted another provider, LTD Broadband, was based on FCC evaluation of speed testing which it said showed that Starlink was not up to the standards of the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. The SpaceX appeal did not mince words, stating, quote, "This decision is so broken that it is hard not to see it as an improper attempt to undo the Commission's earlier decision, made under the previous administration, to permit satellite broadband service providers to participate in the RDOF program. The decision appears to have been rendered in service to a clear bias towards fiber," unquote. An important step toward reducing future orbital debris is under review by the FCC. The Commission is proposing a change to its satellite post-mission disposal timeframe from 25 years to 5 years. The 5-year rule will require operators planning disposal through uncontrolled re-entry into Earth's atmosphere to complete disposal as soon as practicable, and no more than 5 years following the end of mission. The new regulations apply to satellites ending their missions in, or passing through the low Earth orbit region below 2,000 kilometers. It would apply to both U.S. licensed satellites and systems, and non-U.S. licensed satellites and systems seeking U.S. market access. If the rule is adopted at an upcoming Commission meeting, it would provide for a 2-year grandfather period to reduce the burden on satellite operators and have potential waivers for some science missions. Vice President Kamala Harris, visiting the Johnson Space Center, talked to astronauts on the International Space Station. Later, she chaired her second session of the National Space Council. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson was in attendance, along with a number of agency representatives. Here are some highlights of her day.
Good morning from Mission Control in Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room, as Vice President Kamala Harris has just entered the room, escorted by the Director of Flight Operations here at the Johnson Space Center, Norm Knight. Behind them, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, Associate Administrator Bob Cabana, and JSC Center Director Vanessa Weich and Deputy Director Steve Kerner. The Vice President is here at the Johnson Space Center today to chair the second meeting of the National Space Council this afternoon, and before that, she'll have an opportunity to talk to Expedition 67 flight engineers Kjell Lindgren, Bob Hines, and Jessica Watkins on board the orbiting outpost. The Vice President is being introduced to the Chief of the Astronaut Office, Reed Wiseman, and astronaut Christina Cook. On console is Flight Director Mike Lammers, shaking the Vice President's hand. The Chief of the Flight Director Office, Emily Nelson, also viewing the proceedings today.
Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event? Station Houston, please use the handheld mic for Space Ground 2.
We are ready for the event.
Madam Vice President, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Madam Vice President, we have you loud and clear. It's great to see you at JSC and an honor to speak with you from the International Space Station.
I am so excited to be with you all as Vice President, as the head of the Space Council, and as an American who is a space nerd. I'm so thrilled to be with each one of you. And thank you for your excellence. Thank you for your service. How are you guys doing?
We are doing great. We are fellow space nerds, and we really appreciate you and the Space Council and everyone there, the support that you all have for the human spaceflight program.
You know, I've invited some students to join us today, and we've been talking with folks, of course, around the country about what you all are doing. Can you share, for those who have not been on the International Space Station, how does it impact your view of Earth when you've had that experience? Does it change your view of Earth and your perception of who we are who live on Earth?
Oh man, that's a great question, and I think it's something that we all share up here. You know, one of the unique perspectives that we have here is to see Earth in its entirety. You know, we orbit the Earth, we see 16 sunrises and sunsets every day, and we look down and we see a world with no borders. We see and work with people that are, you know, from all different backgrounds and things like that. And so our perspective up here is that we're all part of one team. We all work towards one common purpose, and that when we set our minds towards those kinds of goals, we can accomplish anything. So it is really phenomenal to be up here, and it is great looking down on the Earth. You do realize how fragile it is and how much we have to take care of it as well. And so it is just really a privilege to be up here, and just really an honor.
Lessons for all of us. We're all in this together, aren't we? But you can see that when you're in space, that we on Earth are all in this together. And I appreciate your point about the fragility of this beautiful Earth of ours and the need, therefore, to take care of it. Tell us what you are learning on the space station that is helping us be smarter around how we take care of Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, first of all, Vice President, it's an honor and privilege to be speaking with you today. But yes, we are honored and privileged to be able to use the International Space Station as a test bed and as a laboratory to be able to learn lessons that we can apply to Earth. So things like learning how to grow plants without soil, and being able to use that back on Earth to help with food security. Thinking about learning about how cells immune cells age while we're up here, and thinking about how we can help with immune cell aging back on Earth. There's so many different aspects of what we do up here that can be applied to making Earth a better place.
And everything you spoke of is about life, isn't it? And what we can do through food, through the growth of agriculture that feeds the species and the population, but also what we can do to improve the condition of human life in terms of sickness, and what we can do and discover in terms of treatment. That really is so exciting. I'm going to have a bunch of students with me today. What would you tell them and share with them to encourage them to continue with their studies in a way that they would either one day be on the International Space Station or could be here on Earth working with these incredible professionals I'm around right now to facilitate the work you all are doing in space? What's your advice for our students?
Well, I think that
And just as the Vice President was asking her question, we passed out of range of our tracking and data relay satellite system for a few minutes.
Vice President Harris, we are now resuming operational audio communication.
So a brief conversation between the Vice President of the United States and Expedition 67 flight engineers Kjell Lindgren, Bob Hines, and Jessica Watkins. Again, the Vice President here in Houston and at the Johnson Space Center to chair her second meeting of the National Space Council this afternoon. That will be live on NASA television at 1:20 p.m. Central Time, 2:20 p.m. Eastern Time today. And so with that, we'll wrap up our coverage of the Vice President's call to the Expedition 67 crew on board the International Space Station.
It is truly an honor to be with so many leaders here today. I've had the chance to visit with quite a few of you this morning, and I will tell you, each and every one of you and our panelists, you inspire me and you inspire our nation, and by extension you inspire the world. So thank you all for what you do. And to the members of our administration, the members of Congress who are here, private sector leaders, international partners, and of course my fellow Americans. Thank you and welcome to the second convening of our National Space Council. So 60 years ago next week, just up the road at Rice University, President John F. Kennedy delivered an address on the future of the American space program. At the time, the space race with the Soviet Union was well underway. And while our nation had made many discoveries and achieved many milestones in the years before, at the time, America was at real risk of falling behind. And so, to the assembled thousands and to the entire world, President Kennedy made a vow. Before the end of the decade, America would do what no nation had done before. We would set foot on the moon. Because of the vision of President Kennedy, because of the commitment of President Johnson, a champion of the American space program since his days in the United States Senate, and because of the hard work and ingenuity of thousands of Americans, our nation, in fact, did achieve that goal. In the decades since, America has orbited Mercury, landed rovers on Mars, and flown by Pluto. We have looked back on our Earth from billions of miles away, and we have built a telescope powerful enough to observe our universe as it was billions of years ago. Imagine. For generations, with our allies and partners around the globe, America has led our world in the exploration and use of space. And I do believe that our leadership has been guided by a set of fundamental principles: cooperation, security, ambition, and public trust, which is the recognition, of course, that space can and must be protected for the benefit of all people. Today, as was the case 60 years ago, our nation's leadership in space is critical to our economic prosperity, to our scientific and technological progress, and in a time of increasing great power rivalry, to our national security. So the mission of this council is to preserve and promote American leadership in space, to synchronize our nation's civil and commercial and national security space activities so that America may continue to use space to improve the lives of people in our nation and throughout our world. Last year at the first meeting of the National Space Council, we identified 3 priorities essential to that mission. First, expanding our STEM workforce. And I've invited some students here today because they truly are the future of our leadership on that level. Second, a priority is addressing the climate crisis. And third, promoting international rules and norms to govern space activities. Today, the business of our work is for the Council to report on the work that has occurred since our last meeting across these areas. We will today also discuss the work yet ahead, the work we must still do to continue to move forward. In particular, the work we must do to build a skilled technical space workforce, to advance human space exploration, and to establish rules for novel commercial space activities. First, building our skilled technical workforce. So last week, with many of you, I had the honor to visit the Kennedy Space Center. There I met some of the people who are building the future of the American space program. And as you might expect, these were engineers, literally rocket scientists, astronauts, and programmers. And they were also welders, machinists, and electricians. Today, the space industry employs tens of thousands of skilled technical workers. Even so, there are thousands more jobs for technical workers, good-paying jobs that often do not require a four-year degree, but are essential to our space program. And these jobs are just waiting to be filled. Last year, I called on private sector leaders to help our nation address this workforce need. And today, I'm proud to say over a dozen commercial space companies are answering that call. In fact, next month, these companies will kick off 3 regional pilot training programs, one in Florida, one on the Gulf Coast, and one in Southern California. This coalition of companies will partner with our community colleges, with our technical schools, and our unions to help workers learn the skills they need to take on the new jobs that are being created in the space industry, and to help our nation lead the way in space. So that brings me to our second area of focus, and a focus of our meeting for today as well, which is advancing human space exploration. Soon, for the first time in half a century, America will go back to the moon. The Artemis Program will return American astronauts to the lunar surface. Yes. And as Madam Director mentioned, it will include the first woman and person of color. And think about it. So when we went before, indeed with pride, we planted our flag. It was rather temporary, that visit. With the Artemis program, it's not just to visit, but to live and to work on the moon. Think about that. The Artemis program, yes. The Artemis program will establish the first space station in lunar orbit and the first lunar base camp, where astronauts will train for the first mission to Mars. And our nation is also leading the way in human space exploration closer to home. For over 2 decades, astronauts aboard the International Space Station have advanced scientific progress. In fact, I was honored to speak with 3 of them this morning, from here, of course. NASA has used the station's unique microgravity environment to develop new treatments for cancer and rare genetic diseases. And when I spoke with them this morning, they talked about how their work is helping us fight the climate crisis. Their work is increasing the productivity of our farms and slowing the effects of aging. So our administration and we all gathered today are committed to continuing that work, which is why last year our administration announced that we would extend our commitment to the International Space Station through 2030. And that being said, We are aware that the International Space Station will not remain operational forever, that we all know, which is why NASA is working with the private sector to develop the first generation of commercial space stations. And as we will discuss more today, our administration remains committed to making sure that NASA maintains the capacity to conduct cutting-edge research in space. Which brings me then to our final area of focus, establishing rules for novel commercial space activities. Today, private space companies have capabilities that would have been difficult to imagine even a decade ago. Today, private companies can dock satellites in orbit. They can capture and move space debris out of the way of our satellites and space stations. And soon, they will be able to repair and even build new structures while in orbit. These novel activities will enable America's continued leadership in space. But because these capabilities are so new, few rules currently exist to ensure that they are conducted safely, effectively, and sustainably. Which is why, in consultation with civil and commercial stakeholders, our administration is currently developing the first rules as a framework for novel space activities. These rules will promote innovation and enable competition. They will reinforce the sources of America's global strength, such as our innovation and our industrial capacity. These rules will be flexible enough to cover space activities that have not yet even been imagined. And they will help ensure that our nation remains a global role model for the responsible use of space. All of this, then, is part of our administration's larger vision for space. As I explained last year, as activity in space grows, we must also establish international rules and norms to reaffirm the rights of and demand responsibility from all spacefaring nations. Since our last meeting, 8 new nations have signed on to the Artemis Accords, which establish clear norms for civil space exploration, bringing the total of signatories to 21. This April, I announced that our nation would not conduct destructive, direct ascent, anti-satellite missile testing. And later this month, the United States will introduce a resolution at the United Nations General Assembly to call on other nations to make the same commitment. And here's my final point. Much has changed since our nation first set our sights on the moon 6 decades ago. We have traveled billions of miles into the unknown, and we have learned many great and profound truths about our universe. And yet, in a very real sense, we have only just begun our journey into space. There is so much we still don't know, and so much we still haven't done. Space remains a place of undiscovered and unrealized opportunity. So our task then, and our responsibility, dare I say, is to work together to guide humanity forward into this new frontier and to make real the incredible potential of space for all people. May God bless you, and may God bless America. Thank you all.
In conjunction with the Space Council meeting, the National Transportation Safety Board and Federal Aviation Administration signed an agreement clarifying the roles of their respective agencies and how the NTSB and FAA will work together to investigate commercial space mishaps. The last agreement between the two agencies was signed 22 years ago, long before commercial human spaceflight was a reality. The new Memorandum of Agreement identifies investigative responsibilities, interagency notification procedures and reporting responsibilities of the NTSB and FAA in connection with commercial space mishap investigations. The document also describes how the agencies will coordinate on the exchange of information, data and use of resources or services. The NTSB will be the lead investigative agency for commercial space launch or re-entry mishaps that result in a fatality or serious injury to any person, regardless of whether the person was on board the commercial space launch or re-entry vehicle, or damage to property not associated with the commercial space launch or re-entry activities or the launch site, from debris that could reasonably be expected to cause death or serious injury. The FAA will be the lead investigative agency for all other commercial space mishaps. Sunday is September 11th, a tragic day that will live with us forever. It is Patriot Day and National Day of Service and Remembrance.